Everyone, and welcome to the Halloween edition of the SD61 Operations Policy and Planning Committee meeting. My name is Trustee Rob Painter. I am the chair of this meeting, and I'd like to begin with our acknowledgement of the traditional territories. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Seeking a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a mover? Trustee Kwan. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, you got to get into gallery view here. I'm seeing no hands. All those in favor of approving the October 23rd, 2023 agenda? And that is approved. And just to confirm for all the viewers that the voting members tonight are myself, Trustee Kwan, Trustee Gagnon, and Trustee Duncan in her ex officio chair of the board capacity. Other trustees will be participating in the conversation, but will not be voting. They're members of the Education Policy Directions Committee. Next up is the approval of minutes. The recommended motion that the September 18th, 2023 Operations Policy and Planning Committee meeting minutes be approved. Do I have a mover? Trustee Kwan. Trustee Gagnon is sulking that one on that one. So, no, I'm kidding. And any amendments? Trustee Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a question of clarification at B of the minutes, or B1 to be precise. It references Ms. Peters as an educator. I wanted to just confirm that she is in fact an educator rather than a commentator or an author. So we just wanted to get some clarity around that.
Can I seek clarification on that one from staff?
Through the chair, Chair Painter, we will look into that and make the let the committee know if we need to make an adjustment to the minutes. But I don't think I'll research that right now and let you know if I can find that answer out.
And it's always. Thank you very much, Superintendent. It's one of those terms that has certain connotations and within this particular audience, so that would be a good one to clarify. Thank you. Any other points? And what is the will of the committee? Are we okay to approve pending that clarification, or do we want to hold off until next month? I'm biased towards approving, but all right. Seeing general agreement, all those in favor of approving the minutes? And Trustee Gagnon?
I abstain as I was not at that meeting.
Okay. So, Superintendent? No.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So when I read the individual signature line, it says that they are an educator.
But I'm just trying to recall. The only reason I would tend to split hairs is because within the confines of our discussions, educators typically refer to people who have a formal background in education. That's my interpretation. I recognize that. Trustee Kwan, have you got a point?
Yeah, I think she was a high school teacher for many years.
Okay, that's right. Thank you. Well, I guess that fits the bill. I know that she's working in privately now, but still in that capacity. Thank you. And business arising. Do we have any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we move into community presentation on pedestrian safety with Sean Birdsell. So Sean, you've got 5 minutes, and I'll let you know if you're getting to that point.
I'm just gonna wait for my share slides to come up.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hello and good evening. My name is Sean Birdsell, and this evening I wish to address safety concerns at Marigold Elementary. Next slide, please. First, let us review some safety theory. This is something called an accident triangle or safety pyramid. It is a conceptual tool used to illustrate the relationship between near misses, injuries, and fatalities. It tells us that every injury is preceded by a greater number of near misses, and that addressing minor incidents can help prevent severe ones. We are regularly seeing near miss incidents at our school. It is, therefore, only a matter of time before someone is injured. Next slide, please. In 2022, the district shared plans for 2 new learning studios at our school. This is a drawing I marked up to share my concerns with the principal and the district. To the left of this drawing is the main parking area used by the school. To the right of this drawing is the school building. Running left to right is the primary sidewalk that connects the parking area with the school. In the middle of this drawing are 5 new parking spots that require vehicles to cross that sidewalk, along with my colorful attempts to illustrate the obvious risk of this arrangement. Simply put, this design is prone to injure pedestrians. Next slide, please. The parking area was then constructed almost exactly as the drawing illustrated, and I was told that future concerns were to be directed only to the principal. In the following months, a few changes were made, but they were, by observation, ineffective. Frustrated by a lack of progress, I emailed Superintendent Whitten in June of 2023. She returned my email more than 100 days later to let me know the district was continuing to look for additional solutions. This delay illustrates the district's inattention and disinterest in resolving these issues. Next slide, please. Here is a quick summary of the improvements made to the area. First, the district installed a fence to separate the playground area from the parking spots. Further, they built a chip trail to direct pedestrians from the parking area to the playground. It will come as no surprise that most people leaving the parking area are intending to walk to the school, not to the playground. This chip trail also disadvantages community members who are pushing strollers, have mobility or visual impairments, or wearing footwear that makes the chip trail itself a hazard. As a result of this inexplicable design, this chip trail is not often used by the school community. In the past, we have been told that we are not permitted to use Spectrum High School parking because it is unsafe to have young students walking through an active parking lot. I happen to agree, yet this is precisely the situation the district has created. Next slide, please. Let us return to safety theory. This model is called the hierarchy of controls. At the top of the triangle, the model shows you the most effective solutions of controlling a hazard. They are to eliminate or isolate the hazard. The bottom shows less effective controls, including administrative controls. These are rules, and they are the second least effective control. Next slide, please. Here are 4 rules currently in use at Marigold School. 3 of them are real rules that have been communicated to the school community. Please do not hit children with your vehicle is a 4th rule that I made up. I would stress, all 4 of these rules are equally effective at preventing the injury of a child. My point is, if the current rules, or indeed any rule at all, could sufficiently control the hazard, we wouldn't be seeing near-miss incidents. But we are. Next slide, please. In consideration of the current situation, it may be essential to realize that personal protective equipment is a critical layer of last resort, and the district should immediately supply hard hats and high visibility vests to all students. But no, Marigold needs actual solutions. The district must swiftly act to eliminate or isolate the hazard. More rules are not adequate. Next slide, please. Shown here are some suggestions from our school community for your consideration. I gladly report in recent days that the school has started using a gate to reduce vehicle traffic in the area of concern. I look forward to seeing the district act swiftly to continue to improve safety conditions. I also appreciate the opportunity to add details of the district's unacceptable delays to the public record. Thank you for your time and good evening.
Thank you very much, Sean. There is an opportunity for question and answers. Sean, you are not obliged to respond to anything. That is, but there is an opportunity for engagement. And the superintendent, can I send the question your way, perhaps, for a redirect, possibly? Are there any new rules or considerations in place at Marigold that may alter the way that that space is being used?
Thank you very much, Chair Painter. I will pass this over to Associate Superintendent Arts, who does have a response.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you. Through the chair, as mentioned in the presentation at the end, we have looked at making some changes there in order to make it safe at some peak times. So signage was put up a couple of weeks ago to ask people not to come into the parking lot in a period of time in the morning and a period of time in the afternoon. The signage was not as effective as one maybe would hope. People would ignore the sign and continue to drive in during those times when students were in that area. And as mentioned, we are now closing the gate entirely during those peak times so vehicles cannot come in. That's been done for the last week. Parking space has been removed by the gate to ensure that no one parks there, so it always can be closed and open. So the gate is being physically closed and cars are not able to be into that area where the concern was expressed now during the times of drop off and pickup, basically, for lack of a better description. I confirmed with the principal today that that's been in place for the last week and working well.
Trustee Duncan, thank you, Associate Superintendent Arts. Trustee Duncan, please go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, and I appreciate if this is a question that can't be answered in the meeting and would need to be brought back to the board. I'm just wondering if we can get a bit of context about what kind of sort of design, what process is in place for the design of parking areas where we are building childcare on site. So like Marigold is by no means the only school that's seeing childcare on school grounds. And I know that there's a parking component that comes along with these sites. So wondering if the board can get some further information about how the planning and design of the childcare sites, including any parking required, how health and safety is woven into that process.
Superintendent, could I ask you, and possibly this is a facilities question? No. Oh, wait.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Painter. I would ask Director of Facilities Marnie if she has a response or if we need to follow up at a later date.
No, I can respond. So we do have a number of community consultations that we do. And we did at Marigold. There was about 4 of them in total. Every site is a little bit different, so it's not one fits all. We work really closely with the principals. In this case, there's been 3 principals from the time the childcare was approved until now. There was only 2 spots, one near Spectrum and then one down by the school. The one by the school that was incorporated in this plan was done. We worked with civil engineers who worked on the safety plan with us as well in order to install it. So it was installed based on the permits. And then we worked with the principal based on best use practices. And I know in this case, the parking spots are for childcare use only. and they now back in, and the principal and the childcare provider has been really good at having the parents not use those during peak times, but there's also other parents at the school well. So closing that emergency gate is going to be the best solution as well for safety.
Thank you. Trustee Kwan.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate this being brought to our attention. Thank you, Sean, for your presentation. Really enlightening to hear some of the stuff that's going on. I know we all take safety of our students seriously, and something like this, unless it's brought to our attention, we don't really know what's going on with every school. So really do appreciate that. I did really appreciate also some of the suggestions from your community that were brought forward on how to deal with this. And I just wondered if we could provide an opportunity at some point to look over some of these suggestions that were brought and how feasible they would be and how we could put them into place just to increase that safety measures.
Thank you very much. I myself am mindful, being the provincial government type. A while back, we introduced a program called Gender-Based Analysis, GBA+. And the idea wasn't so much to focus only on gender, but to try to examine problems from different perspectives, try to put ourselves into, the shoes of other parties when we're looking at solutions. And what brought this up was not just the parking itself, but some of the mitigation strategies that were identified here. And I understand that I'm taking them a little perhaps out of context, but issues like the chip trail and whether or not that would be a useful solution, as was pointed out, could be a challenge for people with mobility issues or strollers, etc. So it's one of the things that, and I'm happy to provide a sample to my colleagues and to the superintendent for consideration, but just the idea of when we look at matters before they become problems, that we try to look at as many different perspectives as possible to, really ensure that we're looking at the avoidable and making plans with as broad a consideration to people's specific needs as we can. Is anyone else? Are there any other comments, observations? Seeing none, Sean, thank you very much for bringing this to your attention. I anticipate that we'll be able to rely on you to remind us if there are any lingering challenges, but I do hope that we're seeing a move in a more positive direction now.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, we're now moving into a district presentation, Spectrum Turf and Rink, the STAR project. And we'll have the principal of Spectrum, Bruce Bidney, and teacher athletic director, Dawn Butcher.
Hey,
And there they are.
yeah, good evening, everyone. It's been a few years, but we're excited to be back to have a little bit of a, I guess, what's happening, what's new with our project, where we are since we last met. I would say probably in person, well, 2.5 years ago, perhaps. It would be about then. And so we have a video that we'd like to start off first to show just sort of where we've gotten to in the last little bit. And as you said, I'm joined by Dawn Butcher, our athletic director, PE teacher, social teacher, and basically the main person behind this whole thing. We've been at this for what, 6 years, Dawn? 6 years. Five to 6 years. So here we are tonight. I'm really excited to share this with you.
Yeah, I'll share the video, Bruce. Thank you. And let me know if there's no sound. Hopefully the sound will come through on this one. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Elle, and I'm going to talk to you about the Spectrum Turf Community Project.
The Spectrum Turf Community Project is a $2.7 million project to transform kids' lives and our community at large. The project seeks to change an unusable and unsafe field into an amazing community asset that will transform our community and lives. The safe artificial turf field and building will allow community programs and kids to thrive through a 760% increase in community field use. With 13 organizations directly benefiting, land right holders of Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and stakeholders like the Victoria Spartans, the Greater Victoria Minor Football Association, West Castle FC, and McElhaney Engineering have come together to transform Spectrum Schools Field to be a safe community asset that everyone can benefit from. Whether 7 to 70 years old, this facility will transform our community while boosting health, wellness, relationships, and reconciliation for years to come.
We need your support, kids need your support, our community needs your support. Please get involved.
And
Thanks.
load up the presentation, Bruce, excuse me.
Yes, please. Yeah. And just as we get started there with Eddie again, this has been a number of years that we've been together doing this work, and probably the best thing that's come out of this so far for both of us and our whole committee is the community building piece that Elena spoke to in the video. It's been quite the enjoyable adventure, as we would call it. We've been through the ups and downs, and I think tonight we have a good opportunity here to share where we're at with our current turf program. I guess the other big piece as well is that we're also here to say that we're at no time now are we ready to give up. We are driven. We are driven for our community. We're driven for our kids, and we have our big family. We have our family of schools. We're looking at equitable opportunities for students in our community, and we really believe this project is transformational for our school and most importantly our kids.
Next slide, please, Andy. Thank you. Yeah, so we've been working with SD61 facilities with Chuck and then Marnie. We're also working with McElhaney Engineering, who's working in kind for us. A huge engineering company is really helping us. Spectrum grad of 1990 in Sander as the branch manager. And they've been absolutely outstanding helping us further the project. As well, recently we've added a sports architect that has designed the most recent plans that we've shared with you. We've also done geotechnical assessments. There's a whole lot of clay on that field. We also have done light modeling. Not a lot of light is hitting the street, which is awesome. And we're even engaging our Spectrum community. We've got parents like Colin Cronkite, that is an engineer that's going to do the mechanical and electrical planning as well. So it's like Bruce said, it's really that community effort. Next slide, please, Andy. So here's the concept layout. And if you go to the next slide again, Andy, we have a number of plans that you can look at. So if you actually have that presentation in front of you, you can click the blue link on the right there, and you will get access to all of those plans. And next slide, please, Andy. So this is the most recent kind of conceptual design. It's not a final design. This was done by Annie Carbonell, who we're working with, and she is and her team, Graham and Bobby, have really done an outstanding job of this design. And so this is a design that we're taking forward, or we have taken forward to facilities and also our Indigenous Ed department to really look at protocols. And Shelley's helping us with that to find a local Indigenous artist. So the metal on the outside, the design is hopefully Songhees or Esquimalt, and it's a space that can be used not only for the people using the field, but also the school at large. So it's an outdoor space that can be used. We only get access to the field really for 7 months of the year, 3 months of the year because of the weather, and it's underwater, and there's lots of pools on that field. But hopefully, with a field there it's not going to get all saturated, and a space like this will have more time outside, which I know the kids appreciate. And next slide, please. This is what the building looks like. As we mentioned before, the design on the outside, it's perforated metal, kind of similar to a bus stop shelter. And inside the building itself, we have the 2 change rooms and then a universal washroom, storage, and a mechanical room. So it's a basic design, but Annie and her team have made it look really attractive. The placement is not yet known if we get that far. And that will be a discussion with Marnie and the engineering firm that we're working with.
And also just to add with Don there, like this space as well would be designed as a phase 2 piece. Turf would be the initial build. Phase 2 would be hopefully the building would also bring more classroom space for students. As you know, Spectrum is growing, our community is growing. So especially under the new PEHE curriculum, we do need more classroom space and for all students. So this would be another opportunity for more learning space for our kids. Next slide, please.
And as we've mentioned, that community, the communities behind this project, including Songhees and Spangled Nations, along with our IED support, we've been honored to work with Councillor Karen from the Songhees and also Chief Rob from Esquimalt Nations, and they've helped really shape the project, especially the deliverables on the TRC's call to actions, 88 and 89 specifically, which really focus on access to facilities, health and wellness for Indigenous peoples. Yes, next slide, please. We also have partners such as the Victoria Spartans, West Castle FC, and recently added is the Sport and Social Club. And as mentioned before, we have one of the biggest engineering firms in Western Canada, McElhaney, helping us with the process. They've been absolutely outstanding, and you know, they've already put 10,000 down to support our progress, and there'll be more in the new year. Yeah. Next slide, please.
Just where we are now with partners and community to support. As you know, over 6 years, some of individuals have changed, but we continue on with meeting any groups locally that we can that will be supportive of our project. Sandwich Councillor Maida Westhaver is now working with us as part of our team. Has had three children come through our school, and herself is a graduate of Spectrum, so we're pretty lucky there. And then we've met now with Sandwich Mayor Dean Murdoch, and we're looking at the feasibility studies that we've done within Sandwich to look at the need for parks and recreation. Once again, as Dom's alluded to, McElhaney has been a wonderful supporter of this project. We've had the in-kind donations. We have a former parent of a student here, Bobby Souza, that's out in the community right now working amongst former colleagues and old business partners, looking at the in-kind donations to help bring the price point down. We've run a fundraising process to identify perhaps our top 100 donors that we can start to reach out to in the community. And that's a big piece with our financials and our donation. We've now finally, over this timepiece and a bit of a hiatus there, we're in a position now that we believe we will have a package that we can share with community that will actually speak to the project with its actual design, sizing, needs of concrete, needs of building materials, all those sorts of things. We didn't quite have the package ready, but I think we're in a place where we can do that. We've raised close to $50,000 in fundraising so far, which a lot of that money has gone back in to paying for these services that have not come through in kind. And it's we're ready to get your support today so we can keep this project going. We think we're in a really good place, and most importantly, again, we're doing this with the community. Which next slide, Andy, please. Is the public consultation. So since our last board meetings, we have run 2 consultations. We did one in the school in our main foyer with our committee, and we opened it up to all our various neighbors. We had a pretty good turnout. 50 people showed up for that consultation. Very positive support. We also did one out on the school field. I believe Karen was there for that one, and we had a fairly good turnout. Chief Rob Thomas did a territorial welcome. It was a nice feeling to be out on the field together. We had a nice story in the Times Colonist about it as well. And we really feel we've got the support now, and we just really want to keep this going. And we're here tonight to ask you, the board, for your continued support. Next slide, please. And Dom, you can speak to that.
Yeah, so this was the most recent public consultation results. You can see on the left there the map of where the responses came from, and it was very, very positive. 5 out of 5 would be the strongly support, strongly agree with, and we were able to get a 4.72 mark on the through the survey. So we were very pleased with that, and that's very similar to the previous one that we ran. Yeah. And last slide, please.
So it's our in summary. So again, thank you for your time this evening. We truly appreciate it. Again, we've worked with School District 61 and our local nations and our various community partners to make this dream a reality. The new plans are ready to go. We've got the architects, we've got the engineers. It's very exciting for us as a committee. And again, we are here to ask for your continued support. And yeah, that would be it for us tonight in our turf project. Thank you again, folks.
Thank you. An opportunity for questions, comments from anyone? Trustee Kwan.
Unmute. Thanks so much for the presentation. It's great to see the updates and some of the stuff that you've been doing since I saw you last. I did just want to point out that we actually only have a link to the video, and it's a short video of just that first introduction. So those design plans, if you can get them through the Secretary Treasurer or the Superintendent to us, would be wonderful to take a look at them. Thank you.
Yep. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. We will do that right after this. Yep.
Definitely.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks very much to you both for being here tonight. We appreciate your time and all the passion you bring to the project. Just want to also ask if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the consultation documents, just so that the board can review where you are and what the community is saying about the project. That would be most appreciated.
Definitely, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
One question I had was just about project scope, and it has been a while since we initially explored the STAR program or the initiative, and I appreciate that things have changed a little bit in time. Was there a field house in the original proposal, or is this something that's been considered later on?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. We when we go back to the original one, we were called the STAR. It was the Spectrum Turf and Rink, and at that time we had a rink and 2 turfs. Now we've gone down to the 1 turf. That was through a lot of our consultation as well. Mostly, the biggest piece out of our consultation we found was the environmental impact, especially when we worked through SANAGE as well, and keeping the green space. And so we've got to a part in our project that we believe, as many of our stakeholders would attest to it, as well as our school community, is that the extra building space would be very important for this project. So this phase is something we've always wanted, but it's new within the scope of the original turf plans.
With the washroom facility as well, it's important to have that washroom if we've got people on the field as well. So it's also always something we considered. It would be a phased approach though, so the permitting and everything would be separate. So first things first would be the field. We have to have a porta potty out there. Well, we do have a porta potty out there currently for field users.
Yeah.
But eventually we would come back, I think, with the designs and get your approval for that for the building. But first and foremost, the field.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate you bringing our attention to it, because late surprises are never good. So letting us know ahead of time is always the best approach, I think.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments, observations? Seeing none, thank you to both Don and Bruce. I really appreciate this and look forward to learning more as we go.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Have a good evening. Next up is superintendent's report. Anything from the superintendent, or are we moving straight along to personnel?
Chair Duncan, we're moving straight along to personnel.
All right, then. We'll start with the human resources update, a staffing report from District Principal of Human Resource Services, Sheriff Stabito.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. It seems like time goes by very, very quickly. So the last time I did present, I was asked a few questions about postings and some of the posting process. So I thought this time I'd bring a little bit more information to the table, just to give you an idea of some of the numbers that we deal with when we're looking at postings, whether it be GBTA or QP947. And again, the two areas that I will be commenting on will be GBTA teaching staff and then the QP947 educational assistant staff. So I believe that my report is on between pages 18 to 20, and I have a few charts there that I'm going to be referring to. So on page 18, I've discussed the details around our teacher posting process. Most of our external postings are in the form of our TTOC postings. So we try to bring the teachers in on the TTOC list, and then from the list, TTOCs can apply for positions as other teachers can apply for positions that are already in the district. So we actively recruit for the TTOC list all year long. We bring in upwards of 200 TTOCs per year with the anticipation that there may be resignations or retirements either throughout the year or at the end of the year. And even though we do have those large numbers on our TTOC list, we know that we're in such close proximity to District 63 and 62 that we know that we share with our adjoining districts. So we have to share nicely. So we do bring in a lot of people. We do continue to have an excellent relationship with both UVic and VIU. So we do bring in a lot of student teachers and we bring in student teachers from the mainland as well. So I still think we're very, very fortunate being here in School District 61. Our district is a place that people actually want to be, which is wonderful. So we haven't had those types of teacher shortages that I think other districts are seeing in the province. So very fortunate there. So internally, again, positions are posted throughout the year. Anytime a position arises, so whether it be from a leave or a new position, we tend to post those daily. They're up for 5 days. And then we post after 5 days. And again, we do that internally all year long. On page 19, I've just given you an example there on a chart of how many postings we actually look at when it comes to GVTA teacher postings. I've given you about a 4 or 5 year summary there of the total internal teacher postings that we do have. So our last year, the 2022-2023 year, we had 919 postings within our school year. And that could be anywhere from a 0.08 FTE posting, so that would be 1 afternoon a week, to 1.0 posting. But regardless if they're small postings or large postings, it still takes the same amount of work. So you could just kind of see the volume that we have going through such a small HR office. So we do have a lot of different teachers that are taking leaves or like I said, there could be some new positions coming up. I know right now we have some contingency postings that we're putting out. So again, I feel like we're posting all year long, and indeed we are. So that chart does give you an idea of the vastness. We still do have positions that are difficult to fill. I've given an example there in a chart of the elementary, middle, and secondary positions that we're still looking for. And again, we're struggling with French immersions, primarily at the elementary and middle level. We still are staying up with the postings. So we do not have English teachers in French positions. So we are managing to keep French teachers in those French positions. But having a lot of French TTOCs, that's somewhere where we're looking at and where we're trying to recruit more of. You can see for elementary, we're also struggling a little bit with music prep and district strings. So having all of those district strings positions in 26 different elementary schools sometimes is a little bit of a struggle to actually staff. So we're really focusing on that to make sure that we do have enough music teachers. And again, for middle, we're struggling around the middle school home ec and industrial education, and that's in the secondary as well. And then for secondary, the chemistry, the senior physics, the mathematics. So we're always recruiting for those particular positions. So not a lot of shortages per se, but definitely areas that we're interested in. And when we get those applications, we're looking at those ones right away. On page 19, I've also provided some details around the educational assistants and how we post and process those postings. Again, we actively recruit for educational assistants all year long. We recruit to the spare board and sometimes right into positions. Similar to teacher postings, educational assistant positions are posted first of all internally, and then if we can't find anybody internally, then we post externally. We're just trying to get people in positions. So we find that posting to the spare board, few and far between. So our spare board is quite sparse by the time we end up filling positions within our schools. So I know that Director Newsom's going to comment later on some of our failures to fill that we've had. And again, those are daily failures to fill because of the shortages that we do have on our spare board list. Unlike teacher postings and positions, educational assistant positions are posted either as temporary or continuing all year long. And that just depends on the type of posting that we have. So whereas with our teacher postings, we have the continuing positions that just happen in May, June, and the summer rounds, and then everything else is temporary. So that's definitely a difference. I've provided a bit of a chart on our internal posting trends for our educational assistants. So as an example, for the 2022-2023 school year, we had 281 postings just for educational assistants. So again, a large volume as you can see. We're not alone. Other districts, we're still having a hard time posting and filling as other districts are. So we're always looking for experienced educational assistants. And we are currently actually holding our very first bridge program for the season. So we have one cohort so far of 25, I think it's around 25 candidates that are being trained in the bridge program. So hopefully by the end of the month, we'll have 25 more people in the system. So that's always exciting. I've provided a chart on that very last page of just some raw data of our bridge candidacy. I know that as a trustee group, you're always interested in, the money that we're putting in for the bridge program. Is it worth it? And as you can see with the raw data, we have a lot of people that we have retained through the bridge program. And it's just so important to bring in as many people as we can. So I've given you that raw data so you can have a look at it, and I'll continue giving those statistics as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Trustee Kwan.
Thank you. I just want to say I appreciate this very comprehensive report. It's gives us such a great snapshot of what's going on, and really do appreciate the detail that you've put into it. I was just kind of wondering if I think we start your posting trend as far as internal postings and also difficult to fill. It looks like it starts and, of course, it's hard to go back so many years, but I think it's particularly notable. I would love to just see kind of what that trend is, perhaps maybe on like a 5-year for before the pandemic and after, and, kind of what the effects have been as far as what it looks like now when we're we're posting internal versus kind of before we all had to go home and stay home for a long while. And then also with the EAs, I just had a quick question about the 3-week bridge program. When did we start moving to a 3-week bridge program? When have we been doing that for a while, or is that fairly new?
That was last year that we moved.
Last year. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that's perfect. That gives me some context to the numbers too. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, we had some feedback from, again, we did some survey feedback from candidates, and they just wanted more time in schools, and we thought that that was pretty important.
Thank you, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the report. Really appreciate you taking so much time to provide some context and some additional sort of data. It gives us an idea certainly of how hard you folks are working to fill positions, and then the ongoing recruitment. It's really good for us to have an idea of just how much time and how much resource from your department must be directed to those pursuits alone. I had a couple of questions, one being around so TTOCs. My understanding is that the costs associated with TTOCs has really escalated over the last couple of years, and I'm wondering if there's any sort of trends or notable trends around that increase, and if there are mitigation strategies that we've already put in place or we're planning to put in place to address that. And then I just had a couple of other questions if I might, but maybe I'll pause there first.
So if I can ask the question, in what ways do you mean TTOCs have gone up in cost?
Well, my understanding is that, like, and maybe this is a better question for the Secretary Treasurer, but my understanding is that the TTOC costs have escalated over the last couple of years compared to what we've budgeted, and just wondering if that trend is notable or if it's something that we're looking at or looking at potential mitigations. And I appreciate if that's if you don't have an answer, or if I'm misinformed.
So just to clarify, Trustee Duncan, I understand when we look at the financial reports, we're looking at the overall cost of hiring.
Correct.
So
yeah.
You're focusing
system-wide, yeah.
System-wide on the number of TTOCs that we've been filling, and are you specifically asking about the number of TTOCs or about the cost associated with an individual TTOC?
No, so I'm not talking about the cost of an individual TTOC. That's really not information that we get, really. I'm talking about sort of the total budgeted cost to the district. So maybe it's something I'll raise with the Secretary Treasurer through the budget process. I appreciate if that's not really within your wheelhouse. So the other questions, if I may, Chair, have to do with EA recruitment and retention. I'm wondering whether so I sort of see that the trend is about a 66% retention rate in terms of approximately in terms of the bridge program. And I'm wondering if we have any intel from the folks that don't stay. So if we do any extra interviews with the folks that don't stay, and if we know kind of some of the reasons that they don't stay. And then in terms of the EA recruitment and retention, I wonder whether or not we've considered offering more continuing contracts for EAs, if that is an option as a recruitment and retention strategy.
May I answer? So yeah, we have surveyed some of the EAs that have left the program, and I'd say that the reasons vary. Some of them leave the profession altogether and they move into community support or just a different profession for their own reasons. Some have said the hours, some actually have left the city, and some have actually gone to another district. So it really did vary across the spectrum. So I couldn't quite put my finger on one thing. But that is definitely something I think that we need to do more of, is interviewing people or doing exit interviews. And as for other recruitment ideas, definitely we are talking about more continuing contracts. It's a conversation that we had last week. So just looking at some different ways of keeping people. Again, with continuing contracts comes that feeling of continuity and job security. So Trustee Duncan, you're absolutely right. It's something that we really do need to look at. Yeah.
There's a quarter in the jar for me. I'm going to go to Cindy Rumpf, and then I'll come back to you, Trustee Duncan. So Cindy, please go ahead with your question.
I have a few questions through the chair. The first one is, with the hiring of new TTOCs, particularly new specialist teachers, I understand that you're actively looking for them, but I'm wondering, for people who completed their practicums outside of SD61, is that door open to them as well?
Oh, very much so. Absolutely. And again, when we look at, I know that when we work with UVic, there are some people that do their practicums in other districts, whether it be 62, 63, 64, whatever it may be, some on the mainland. We always invite, and we always have those names of the candidates, and we invite them for interviews as well. Oftentimes we do it through the Make a Future website, just because we don't have that sponsored teacher that is here in the district, but we definitely look at those candidates, very much so.
Next question, Cindy, and then if we go beyond that, I'll start bouncing between you and Trustee Duncan just to
Okay.
fairness.
Thank you for answering. My next question is, because I'm a music teacher, in regards to the unfilled music jobs, particularly to elementary strings, have we also looked at maybe changing timetabling them so it would fit, so other teachers that were in partial jobs would be able to apply for them? Because right now, from what I understand, talking to music teachers, is that they're unable to apply for certain jobs because it conflicts, even though they are on a partial contract.
So some of the positions that we have, especially around strings, I know that they're posted at particular times, but it also says flexible. So honestly, if you know of teachers that are interested in those strings positions, please send them our way, because it does say flexible on there, and we are most definitely interested in getting people into those positions.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Cindy.
You're going to go to Trustee Duncan now.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going back to the conversation we were having around EA retention and recruitment strategies, I wondered whether or not, or sort of, I guess, first of all, what we're doing in terms of mentoring and supervisory opportunities for experienced EAs, whether we're providing those opportunities with sort of incentives or additional compensation in order to, I guess, for me, it's twofold. One, because we obviously want to retain those specialized EAs, but also because I wonder whether having them as additional points of contact and support for new EAs who maybe have limited experience coming into the role might perhaps help us to retain more folks, while at the same time really acknowledging that extra contribution. So just wondered if we considered that, or if we're already doing that.
Actually, through the last round of our bargaining negotiations, we actually have a position now in the district that is a mentoring position for an EA. So we do have somebody in that role. So it's just wonderful that you've mentioned that. And so we're really working on making that transition into the district a little more palatable. It's always difficult coming into a new school or being on a spare board and bouncing around from school to school. We're also working with Pam Halverson, who is actually, she's the one that is running our bridge programs for us, in looking at an EA handbook, just to, again, look at a way of helping people orient into the district, making it a little bit more comfortable, putting all the information in one area, as well as what would maybe a day or even 2 days of orientation look like. So, which we don't really do right now. So, but there's always a cost. Everything that we look at, there's always a cost to it. So we're just trying to balance those pieces out right now. But again, really good ideas, absolutely.
I'm going to shift gears for just a sec. I see Director of Human Resource Services Knudsen has his hand up, and I'm going to jump to him just to keep in the flow of the conversation here.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to build on what Tammy was saying. The mentor that was just started this year has been very well received. We've actually had requests to expand her hours by another 5 hours to just meet the demand for her wonderful work. And she actually presented just on Friday at the QP's Pro D Day. Her session was called "A Day in the Life of," and lots of standing ovations. So I think we're working with a great mentor, and as time progresses, we can demonstrate the value of that and hopefully build out some additional FTEs doing exactly the same work.
Thank you for that. Trustee Duncan, did you?
Yeah, just to follow up, Chair, if I may. I'm really happy to hear that we've actually got a position designed to do some of that mentoring work, and hopefully there'll be some opportunity to look at expanding that to maybe more roles over time. But I'm wondering, do we do orientation? So it's really useful to hear that we don't do orientations at a district level for new EAs coming into the system. I'm wondering if we do schools, like if individual schools do orientations for new EAs, or if an EA is in a situation where they're new, they're called out to a school and the school doesn't know that they're new, or may not know that they're new. So do schools do orientation for EAs?
I can answer. That's probably a twofold answer. If EAs are on spare board and they're new, probably not. Again, they would just be filling in, just as a TTOC would be filling in, a spare board would be filling in. However, I do know that if we have new employees come into a situation, that the principal definitely has some form of orientation at their own school. So, and again, it looks different in every single school.
I would imagine that can be challenging in some regards, since EAs pretty much work bell to bell. So finding the time for orientation can be challenging, I imagine.
Yeah, well, hopefully as we move to larger hours, which again, thanks to the trustees, we have in several schools now. So we're working on those, getting those hours up as well. So absolutely, yeah.
Cindy, I meant to get back to you, so I'm just gonna fit you in here before, so that I don't lose your space again.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. With that in mind, Mike, did you have some additional comments?
I was just going to add to Tammy's comment that each of the schools has a binder available to new EAs when they arrive that gives them an overview of the plans for the student involved and some additional information to help them get started on their first day with that class.
Thanks for that clarification. Principal Sheriff Speedoff, one question I had about EAs, and I'm just trying to keep this straight in my own head, because when we get to the end of the year in June, do EAs know that they're coming back, or do they have to go through the process of applying again for September or sometime leading up to September?
I would a majority of the EAs do know that they're coming back unless there have been changes in hours at the school. So if there are changes in hours and there's a loss of staffing, then perhaps that EA will not come back to that school. And again, we're looking at that as well. We would like to ensure that EAs feel like they have that continuity in that employment. So back to Trustee Duncan and what she said, you know, are we looking at somehow making the positions more stable at this time. So, and that change is to come as we move forward. Again, looking at retention and stability.
Mhm. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Looking for other hands. I'm not seeing anything. Thank you very much. Really appreciate this, and I appreciate the additional details. It definitely shows that you've been putting a lot of thought into this. Thank you. We're going to move on to occupational health and safety, the annual report with Director of Human Resources Services, Mike Knudsen. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you for the introduction. I believe my presentation starts on page 21 of your package or thereabouts. Really of most interest, kind of three areas that I want to touch on. One is an update on where we are with our violence prevention program. In general, where are we in terms of injuries and time loss, and then WCB inspections. So I'll start with the injuries and lost time reports because it's kind of the standard that everybody wants to look at first. And there's a table on page 22 that I would draw your attention to. Last year we had 66 lost time injuries, and that's actually a significant decrease from the year before, 40% decrease. The total lost time reports are split between musculoskeletal injuries, slips, trips, but the actual number of reports adds in the workplace violence prevention program reports. So it has a larger number.
Mike, you're actually a little garbled. Is it? Not sure.
I'll have to talk to Andy.
Mike or.
I'll have to talk to Andy to get a better piece of equipment. Andy, just if you want to make a note of that.
Yeah, are you using
for next
built-in the laptop mic, or is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm using. Laptop. Yeah.
Okay.
But we won't solve that for tonight, so I apologize. I will try to speak a little clearer. The injuries that are reported, a lot of them are just the nature of the work creates injuries for people if they're doing trips, slips, playing in the playground and they're hit by a ball. There's a variety of normal workplace activity that results in injury claims coming in. But I think if you look at the table 1, which is on page 22, the trend, obviously, for many groups peaked during COVID. But in general, it's been fairly stable. And that's, I think, a positive. The challenge is really in terms of how do we, as an organization of our size, help people be more safe at work. And a lot of activity this last end of last year and into this year has been done working with the joint occupational safety teams at the site level, making sure that they're comfortable in their roles. And we've recently expanded the composition of the district occupational health and safety committee. So there's a stream of information that can flow up for broader district related issues. The violence prevention program, significant number of reports, which is good. We want people to let us know what's happening at the work site. And the data for this past year, we had 1,642 reports, but only 1% of those resulted in a lost time injury, which is good. But the most interesting piece of the data, though, is of those reports, 78% of them came from 10 schools. And if you look at the breakdown between elementary, middle, and secondary, 90% of the reports come from the elementary level, which just a lot of voting and being reported is
Sorry, Mike. It's really difficult to hear you now, I'm afraid. Just in the last few seconds, it really deteriorated.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds more like a connectivity issue, Mike, than necessarily the speaker itself.
Are you on wireless or hardwired in, Mike?
I'm plugged into the system.
Okay. Trustee Duncan.
Just a suggestion. I wonder, Mike, if you might consider rejoining and then maybe just turning your camera off. That might help just to reduce bandwidth that you need. Yeah. And then maybe we can at least hear you better.
I turn off the camera now. Does that make
yeah.
any difference?
It does.
Yeah,
so
okay.
Much clearer. Thank you.
Oh, super. Thank you. Good suggestion. So the violence prevention program, as I mentioned, 1,600 and some odd reports. The majority of those, 78% coming from 10 schools. The majority of all of the reports, 90% coming from elementary. So it's, I think, a reflection or an indication of the students' coping mechanisms developing over time. So by the time they actually move on to secondary, a lot of their issues have become more manageable. But it is a combination of great work by the teachers and the EEAs helping them develop those coping mechanisms. In terms of the workplace inspection reports, we had 8 inspections last year. There were no orders issued and only 1 recommendation. But what was most interesting was that 2 of the inspections actually came back with very positive comments from the inspection officer. So that was good work. The new manager for health, safety, and well-being, Rob Clark, and his team have done great work, I believe, getting out and working with the schools, the principals, and the site joint occupational teams to help people feel more connected and understanding what their roles are. Finally, in terms on a go-forward basis, one of the areas of focus for the team and more broadly human resources is actually shifting our focus away from what would be traditionally called occupational health and safety and taking a more holistic approach to cover off mental health and well-being. So that's what you'll see over the coming year, where a lot of our focus will be.
Well, thanks for that. Mike, one question I had, just, and I'll jump in because that's my prerogative tonight. With respect to the sort of the bulk of reports coming from 10 schools, is that a sense of, are you getting a sense right now of whether or not that is reflective of the volume of incidents, or is it more to do with culture in terms of a number of schools proactively supporting EAs to get the reports written, and that we might be seeing some bias that way?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of factors that are at play. Indeed, some of the schools that are the high reporters are actually part of the pilot project. So they were very much engaged and involved. So there's not a surprise there. But I think it is a reflection in terms of talking to our colleagues in inclusive learning. It is a reflection of the demographic of the student population as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for the report. I just really want to acknowledge that, there's been a huge stride forward in terms of the trend analysis and some of the conclusions regarding gaps and possible mitigations. And so, and really just say thank you for sharing that we are making significant strides forward in this area in terms of prevention. And that's great to hear. I wanted to just sort of dive in a little bit to this, some of the mental health and well-being aspects of your plans moving forward. And I wondered whether we have heard from staff about how well or how fit for purpose some of the existing supports that are available to them are. Have we reviewed it all, whether the supports that we have in place that they can access are meeting their needs?
That's an excellent question. I think the biggest tell was the move away from our previous employee assistance program provider to Homewood Health. And that was a reflection of the desire from our employees to have a more responsive and robust service available to them. And Homewood Health provide an excellent menu of supports. And so we're obviously building on that, communicating out to employees, various bulletins and activities that are hosted through Homewood. So I think we haven't done, if you will, a fulsome engagement survey, but certainly we are looking at the feedback that comes in through the various employee groups and our colleagues working at the district principals and down in inclusive learning, etc.
All right, Mike, just confirming you're still there.
I am still here.
Okay. Yeah, just keeping on top of that. Trustee Kwan.
Thanks. Yeah, again, some great information here, and really appreciate especially the graphs showing kind of, by injury and by type. So that was really great to see. I did have a question about the table for reported injury by type. I just wanted, first of all, clarification on VIWP and what that stands for.
Yeah, it's a violent incident workplace report.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I also wondered where, a stress leave might fall under one of these types of injuries.
So mental health obviously is kind of the principal one. But what you're more likely to see is people just taking absences, right? It's people are going to book a sick day. That doesn't show up here. This is just what we report through WorkSafe.
Right. So a stress leave might not go through WorkSafe. That makes sense. Okay.
Correct.
And then one other question, if I might, which is a little further down, and you talked about just one recommendation from WorkSafe on those inspection reports. And I wondered if you can share any further details. Perhaps you can't, but I just wondered if you could share any further details on the recommendation at all.
No, it's I think a reasonable recommendation. One of our sites didn't have enough toilets. So Marty and her team went in and made some modifications. And the inspector said, yep, that's tickety bill.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep, no worries.
And I appreciate it's really convenient for me, Mike, to start asking this sort of question since we've had two great reports in a row. But have you had a chance to talk with Tammy, for example, and look at whether there's any correlations between the kind of incidents that are being reported and retention in the different schools, whether or not there might be any commonality there?
So it's an interesting thought. The problem with these conversations is there's a lot of noise,
right?
And so these reports are being looked at kind of two ways. One, in terms of worker safety plans. So is there something that we can do as a district to support the employee in the work site? So you'll either develop or amend a current work plan. It's used by the inclusive learning team to support their conversations around what does the student need. So this data they look at and they use it for a different purpose. The issues around why somebody may want to be or no longer wish to be an EA is hugely complex. And I think Tammy touched on it. We have indeed had numerous conversations. I don't disagree with Chair Duncan that having exit interviews would be wonderful. The challenge in doing this for years, the challenge is if you give it to somebody to do as a questionnaire, send them a link, for example, they generally don't do it. You get left. If you do it face to face, you're often not provided with the truth. So, exit interviews in and of
losing you
themselves.
there. Your audio, despite lacking your smiling face, we're still missing big chunks of your audio, and it feels like you're giving us some really interesting information. So, could you try that one more time? Just go back a couple of seconds if you can recall.
Yeah. So the exit interviews are a challenge if they're provided as something for somebody to complete. For example, a questionnaire online, they very rarely will complete them. If you do an interview, people are, as they're leaving the building, are not likely to give you a fulsome, honest response. So the data that comes out of that is not particularly good qualitative data. It's one tool. But when you look at what's going on with EAs, there are so many more opportunities. There's so much going on in people's lives. There are so many people that are still struggling to get through COVID. The reasons why somebody would leave, the list is extremely long. So yes, to your long answer to your simple question. Tanya and I had many conversations. The answer is absolutely. It's something we talk about on a regular basis. And we're building that into what can we do moving forward. And I think over this coming year, we have a lot of good ideas that we're hoping to implement.
No, thanks for that. Appreciate you handling a curveball there. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just had one more question. I apologize. I find these these reports fascinating and ever so useful for us as a board. So I just want to say again, thanks to Tammy and to Mike for your efforts to provide them. I just wanted to circle back to some of the violence prevention plans, and then the collaboration between HR and the inclusive learning team. And I appreciate if maybe this is something that will need to go back through the superintendent to somebody in the inclusive learning team. But I wondered if we could get some examples of the kinds of steps that the inclusive learning team take to address student supports on the back of some of the findings through the violent prevention plans. Because of course we know that, students, their emotions are often demonstrated through their actions, and especially at a young age where, they're developing that ability to self-regulate and to manage strong emotions. So just wondering if there are any examples that you can share this evening, and if not, then perhaps Chair, I could direct that question to the superintendent to communicate to the inclusive learning team at another time.
I would prefer not to respond without representatives here from the inclusive learning team.
We understand the appropriateness of that response. Any other questions for Mike on this one? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll move on with the education assistant update. And again, Director of Human Resource Services, Nitsu.
So I believe this report is in your package starting page 24, and it builds a bit on the conversation that Tammy was speaking to earlier. There continues to be challenges, even though the board did support the increasing of the a number of the EA positions to be 30-hour positions. The bridge program, other initiatives, there still remains a number of days when there are unfilled callouts. Kind of alluded to a number of the factors already. There's increasing competition for a lot of the positions that we would normally have on our call-out list. The demographics are also changing. A lot of our more mature, shall we say, employees are looking to move on to opportunities that are perhaps a little less stressful. I think my colleagues from the inclusive learning team, I think, would concur that there's a changing classroom demographic, which plays out in terms of there being a corresponding need for more EAs. And just in general, a general observation, and this isn't just with our district, but across the province, across the country, post-COVID, there has been an increasing use of sick leave. And that increasing use, of course, is reflected in our increasing need to have more people called out. So when you look at those various factors, it's not entirely surprising that the tables that you see on the following page show a good number of days when we have unfilled callouts. So happy to take any questions.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, and I thanks, Mike. I appreciate that, and I think you're certainly hearing that in the community, that the sort of changing demographic, the impacts still being felt post-COVID, both in terms of the likelihood of maybe sick leave being taken, and the challenges that students are coming back to school with. And so I'm wondering, in terms of the, mitigations, I mean, we're looking at more than 50 a day, of failures to fill. And obviously the data on October is not quite complete, but it was complete as of the date the packet came around. But I'm wondering, in terms of retention and recruitment strategies for EAs, whether you think or anticipate that there will be much impact if we are to move to offering more continuing contracts for EAs, because it just strikes me that having some job security would go a long way. Would for me anyway. I don't know. I can't speak for EAs, but I'm wondering what your assessment is, or if you have had an opportunity to make any assessment of whether that opportunity to provide more continuing contracts will pay dividends in the end. And then the only other question I have around this one is just in terms of potential partnerships. So the other thing that we hear loud and clear is that there is sort of an ongoing provincial initiative to try to get an EA standards of practice in place. And I'm wondering whether or not we're involved in that work at the district level. And if there's, if you think that would have a significant impact on EA recruitment and retention.
So a number of thoughts. In terms of making more regular positions, absolutely. We are looking at it. We're actually having, I think the superintendent has me on for tomorrow morning, presenting to a group of administrators on this very topic. So the answer is yes. I think it would be meaningful, and yes, it would make a difference. Costs would probably go up by about 25%, because that's the cost of people then having access to benefits. But that's not necessarily a bad thing when it reduces the recruitment costs associated. So I think we're, looking at it at a very high level, it would probably be a wash in terms of costs. The challenge is just now working out if we go ahead with it, what would it look like in terms of hours? We don't want to be in a situation where we're poaching from other schools that have already established EAs. So if we offer something that's, let's call it 20 hours, if somebody's at 18 hours, they may want to, jump onto the call out board. So there's some mechanical pieces that we need to work through, and obviously we would need to have consultation with our union, with CUPE, to make sure that there's agreement there. So there are some steps that we still need to go through, but I think in general that's the move we will be moving forward with. I don't want to be presumptuous, but that's where I would see us moving. To your second question, the challenge with the variety of students that are in the classroom that may benefit from EA support varies widely. So what the province is doing, I don't know that that's actually the right approach. Do we want to set up, 3 categories, or do we want to have a spectrum of credentials and experience that somebody would progress through? So giving an EA the opportunity to join at very junior level, but actually have the ability to grow and develop and get more money, I think actually would be something that would be more effective than trying to create some hard to find job descriptions. We are not part of that provincial conversation, other than through our representatives, our conversations that we have with our representatives at BCPC, and then CUPE, of course, with their teams. But we can certainly feed ideas into that group. I have some other ideas, but I don't want to jump the steps by announcing something without making sure my ducks are in order at my end first.
I think it would be fair to say that everyone on the board is really interested in this particular topic, and anything to look at staffing support, and in particular EAs. We know that it's a sore spot for a lot of us. It impacts the education for every student in the class, and when the opportunity is right, we would welcome further information.
Absolutely.
I'm looking one last time for hands, questions, comments. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you.
We're moving on to finance and legal affairs, and starting off with the monthly financial report for September 2023. And will this be the Secretary Treasurer or the Associate Secretary Treasurer? Julie's looking straight at me, so take it away.
Through the chair. If you refer to page 26 of the agenda package, you'll see the monthly financial report for September. Last year, so the information that's on the right-hand side is for September 2022. This is actually the information that was reported at OPS in October 2022. So it would have been run shortly after month end. The information that's provided there for September 2023 was run right after month end as well. So the budget that's reflected in this report for both years will be the preliminary budget or the annual budget, plus any changes since then. The actuals that are reflected in this report will be from July to September. So if we take a look at the grand total of revenue, the percentage, we're looking at the amount of revenue budgeted that's not yet received. So the current year, we're at 81%, whereas last year it was at 84%. And jumping down to expenses, which is a couple of pages down, page 28, the very bottom. The grand total there, the percentage reflects the amount of expense budget that's still available to spend. So when we look at the current year at the end of September, there was 86% budget still available to spend. And the year prior was exactly the same amount at 86%. I won't go into details as to what's in the report, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary Chair, for the report. Just had one question around this one on page 28. I believe it's line 448, agents fees. So we're continuing to see sort of an escalation in costs in terms of agents fees compared to what we've budgeted for this year. I think I know we budgeted 261,000 and change, and then we've seen year-to-date costs of 730,000 and change, so significantly above sort of what we budgeted for. Now, my understanding was that we believed that we were going to see these escalating costs stabilize. So just wondered if we could get some context or some information about why they haven't, and what we project moving forward.
I can try to answer that question as best as I can. The agent fees that are there, they're slightly higher right now with the recovery of COVID. Agents receive commission, I believe, on the first and second year. And so when we have a lot of new students that are coming into the district, the agent fees are going to be higher than if we have students that are coming back for years 3 or 4, for example. So I believe what I've heard Jeff Davis explain is that while we're seeing a lot of recovery post-COVID with new students coming back, those fees will come up. But as that starts to normalize again post-COVID, as our enrollment stabilizes, then we will see fewer of those first and second year agent fees. I'll open that up for Julie if she ever wants to jump in and add to it. As to the actual cost compared to budget, this is something that international education would monitor. They're receiving monthly reports, so they would be monitoring that and making adjustments to other areas within their budget. And if they do have additional revenue coming in, then those kinds of things like activity fees, things like that are over and above budgeted, those things can help to offset costs that are exceeding budget. Julie will be working with Jeff also when they do their final budget to readjust. I can see Julie has her hand up as well.
Please jump in, Julie.
Thanks, through the chair. So when the board adjusted the gross profit margin percentage during the 23-24 preliminary budget deliberation, there was a large chunk that we had to remove out of expenditure budgets, but at the time we didn't know where they were going to come from. So the largest line item, we just plugged them to agent fees. And this year, Director Davis will be looking at his budgets and making adjustments and we'll review them in detail during the final budget, try to cover off those student fees by reallocating elsewhere. But it was just such a quick turnaround. We didn't know exactly where those savings were going to come from.
Other questions? Oh, I see Trustee Gagnon. I see your hand now.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the operating revenues on page 26 with line 652, community use of fields, I'm noticing in back-to-back years, we have no revenue reported in year to date or in September of those years. And I'm wondering why? And if there's an expectation of revenue coming in that isn't being met by community, and essentially, yeah, where that money is or should be coming from. Thanks.
Through the chair, facilities had changed their software program that they were using for their rentals. They were using Perfect Mind and have now moved to another software called eBase. I believe we're looking into this because I think that we are renting fields and have been, but it may be going to the community use of facilities line. Alternately, I'm not sure how much field rental use there is in July and August, but I would think there would be some in September for sure. So I think we'll have to get back to you on that to see. It is consistent year over year, and so we'll have to follow up. I don't know if Julie has anything to add to that. No.
Okay. Yes, thanks. It'd be good to be able to know for certain. Okay, seeing no more, I'll move on to the budget change report, which is in the pages immediately following the monthly financial report.
Through the chair, this report is on page 29. The budget change report is included to highlight all revenue changes to the budget and any of the larger expense changes. So when we're looking at the September report, specifically, if you go to the section that is titled Changes and Amended Budget, there has only been 2 changes since the last report in August. The ones on the bottom. So starting with cafeteria revenues to September 30th for 23,000. And also miscellaneous donations and revenues to September 30th, also for around 23,000. So those are the only changes since last month for operating. If you actually special purpose, which is the next page, there's been no changes since last month. And for capital, there's been 1 change. So there's been an increase in interest revenue for local capital of about 2,000. Happy to answer any questions you might have on that.
I'll ask the obvious question, Secretary Treasurer. I noticed after you brought my attention to it, we've got 2 line items for cafeteria revenue budget. One in red at 125,000 that is adjusted as revenues received. And then we have cafeteria revenues to September 30th. So if I understand correctly, next month, will we be seeing a change to the top item to reflect the revenue to that point?
So for that one, the 125,000 that has come out, what that is that's the annual budget. And so we pull that out so that it's not sitting in the accounts. And then you'll see the actual revenue as we collect it come in throughout the rest of the report. So you see the September, and then for next month, you'll see another entry for October. And you'll see that throughout the year. Hopefully we'll come up to at least 125,000.
Okay, all right. I understand the tracking now. Thank you. Questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer, and we're on to the 2023-2024 enrollment update. And is this with you, Secretary Treasurer, or
Yeah.
who's going to be leading this one? Yeah.
I'll speak to it. I will acknowledge that Julie's hard work went into this memo, and she may be able to help answer questions as well. But I will focus, there is quite a bit of information in the memo. Our goal was to try to provide some information as to where and how the increases were coming about. I'll just provide some highlights on the table that's on page 35 of the agenda package. So it's an Excel spreadsheet, and what it is it shows the enrollment at September 29th for the current school year. So what we have included there is what was projected. So that was what we projected in February and submitted to the ministry. And then the actual. So this is not the final 1701, but it would be pretty close. We haven't received final confirmations back from the ministry yet, but historically there hasn't really been any changes from these numbers that we're providing today. We've also included the past 6 years comparative numbers, so you can see the changes over the past 6 years. And then on the right-hand side of the sheet, you can see the increase or decrease. The first column is comparing the projected enrollment to the actual enrollment in the current year. And the far right is comparing the actual enrollment from the prior year to the actual enrollment in the current year. If we just look at the level totals, so if we look at total elementary, we can see that our enrollment is up by 173 FTE from what was projected, and up by 88 FTE from the prior year. Looking at middle, we're up 55 FTE from what was projected, and we're up 121 FTE from the prior year. And at the secondary level, we're up by 168.4 FTE from what was projected, and 178.4 from what the actual enrollment from the prior year. We've also included a category with some of the alternative schools in continuing education and the link. And as a category overall, we're down from what was projected by 5.6 FTE and down from the prior year 4.6 FTE. And we've also included in the non-graduated adults. So they're up by 9.8 FTE from what was projected, and up by 8.5 FTE from the prior year. And if we look at total enrollment, so that would be school age plus the non-graduated adults, we're at 400.6 FTE from what was projected, and 391.4 FTE from the prior year. So obviously, with the increased enrollment, we're going to see increased funding. Most of that we have to keep in mind is offset by related expenses. So with additional students, we have more classrooms, we have increased teaching staff, EAs, school allocations for VP time, clerical staffing, as well as supplies. So there is a fairly small amount that's left over in the end that is available for general use when we do the final budget. And what will happen is when Julie and team work on the final budget, that increase in funding and all of those offsetting expenses will be incorporated into the final budget. So I'll leave my summary at that and see if there's anyone who has any questions.
Thank you. And Trustee Kwan is first of the gates.
Yeah, just actually one question. I'm just looking at page, I think it's 34 or page 3 of your memo, or 34 of the pack up. Right at the very top is a table with regards to unique student needs. And I just wondered specifically for Indigenous education, and I noticed that both projected and actual for this year are up over last year. How does that tie in with the budget that we have, if we're looking back at the revenue report for September? I noticed that the budget is actually down for local education agreements than over last year by about 238,000. So how do those tie together, or am I just trying to make connections where there are none? I don't know, but I wondered if you could speak a little bit to why the budget would be lower, but our numbers are higher.
Sorry, Chair. I'm going to pass that over to Julia. She has her hand up.
Thank you. So there is not a correlation at this point because per our local education agreement, the first 2 quarters of revenue are based on last year's enrollment, as is the budget. So we don't actually start recalculating the LEA numbers until I think it's March, and then June is the final once we get confirmation back from the ministry. So yeah, you won't see a correlation at this point.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, just a follow-up for the Associate Secretary Treasurer, if I may, Chair. So if I'm understanding correctly, then we won't then get the benefit of that additional funding reflected even up to the point where the board is approving our amended budget in February. Is that right?
I would be building the budget based on what I expect the LEA number to be. But the thing is, the ministry reduces our funding by that amount, and then the Songhees Nation pays us for that the same amount. So it's a wash. There's no impact. Ministry doesn't adjust our funding until June. So yeah, it's an in and out.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I just wondered if to build my own knowledge, whether then those kinds of timelines in part contribute to the sort of structural deficit, or what appears to be, a structural deficit, if we're always kind of playing catch up in terms of actual funding that's available. I appreciate that. Excuse me. I appreciate that in the end, it's a wash because whatever comes in also goes out. But equally, in order to understand where we are financially in a timely kind of way, especially at that amended budget time, I would think it's important for us to note that there is additional funding there, albeit it's a wash in the end.
So what I would do during final budget is, so we get our operating grant from the ministry, and then we do an kind of like contra account, an offset of the amount we're expected from the LEA. So that's our net operating grant, and then down in I think it's miscellaneous revenue, we then build it back in. So our total revenue doesn't change. It's an out of operating grant, but an in ministry, or sorry, miscellaneous revenue. So it wouldn't impact the structural deficit at all. And the recalculation from the ministry and the recalculation of the amount that we invoice Songhees is done within the fiscal year. So everything's wrapped up by June 30th.
Did you have a follow-up there, Trustee Kwan? Okay, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. Just another question, not related to that subject, but a different one. So just appreciate the information about level 2 and level 3 student funding and some changes in the way that the ministry, well, the rules the ministry has in place for applying for that funding. Wondering whether we feel like we're well positioned to get funding for level 2 and level 3 students despite those changes.
Through the chair, is it possible just to seek some clarification with regards, Trustee Duncan, do you mean audit changes like with regards to the designation of students?
My understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that the ministry has changed the criteria that they apply or that is applied when districts are applying for funding for level 2 and level 3 students. And so maybe the premise of my question is inaccurate, but if that is the case, if there have been changes to the process for applying for funding for level 2 and 3 or the criteria used, I just wondered if we are well placed as a district to adjust to that and still get all of the level 2 and level 3 funding that students are entitled to. And sorry, this is on page 34 of the packet, the first paragraph after the table.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I think Julia's has her hand up to respond.
Associate Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you. So the comment in the memo about the ministry compliance quality review was more directed at why in 22-23 we had 936 level 2 students, but we had projected a decrease down to 905. It was the understanding that the number of levels 2 students would actually go down. However, we were quite surprised when it had gone up to 991 students. So it's just more the rationale for why the projected was so low. And as for the audit piece, I know that the department has been working closely with schools to make sure that all of the documentation is in place. So if we were audited, the hope is that they would all pass. So that's the number that we submitted to the ministry. So that is the number that we will be funded on.
I've got a curiosity, and I think this goes back to the boundary review days when we saw years and years worth of projected student populations. And I do recall that at the time it was possible to see this demographic bulge in the student population, and we could see that working through from elementary to middle school and on. And in this one, it seems like there's a fairly clear sort of bulge that we had a few years ago in elementary, and the numbers have tapered off a little bit. But otherwise, middle and secondary, our numbers are looking very stable. And I was wondering, is this just me not understanding demographics, or are we looking at, broadly speaking, a fairly solid population right now? Like we're not in the ebb and flow that we've seen in the past, and we may actually be looking at sustained growth for a while. And Associate Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you. So when we got our projections back from Beauregard, they were actually projecting an enrollment decline. And we ended up tweaking some of the numbers after we saw some of the kindergarten enrollments. The increase in 400, we've been averaging about a 1% growth. And the jump to 2% this year was not expected. However, we traced it back and we tried to figure out where the students were coming from. And it is overall growth can mainly be attributed to an increase in ministry funded international students whose parents are in Canada on a study or work permit, and immigrant permanent residents, which would include refugees. So that's a really hard population to predict. Yeah, so that's when we looked at where they were coming from, that's where the majority were coming from. So it was, yeah, I don't know what that trend's going to look like next year. I don't know. It'll be interesting once we get the projections back from Erica, what they do with the information.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And now we have a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, approve the revised policy 3170 operating surplus. And Secretary Treasurer, are you going to lead this one, or?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, when the school district completed its multi-year financial plan at the end of September, we sent it off for review to the ministry. And one of the comments that we received back was that the ministry's expectation around policy for operating surplus is that a contingency would be based on expenses and not revenues. So they made a recommendation to us that we make one amendment to our current policy 3170 operating surplus. And it is to just change one word from revenue to expenses. In the agenda package, the change is reflected on page 41. And I have included actually the paragraph in the memo so you can see the full wording. Basically what it says is that our unrestricted operating surplus, which we call our contingency, would be maintained at between 2 and 4% of the previous year's operating expense instead of revenue. So just below that in the memo, I've done a little calculation so you can see the financial impact of that, which is very minimal when you're looking at over 200 million. So shifting it from revenue to expense is just about $24,000 if you're looking at the 2%, and about 48,000 if you're looking at the 4%. So not a significant impact at all. And so that's I'll just mention too that our current contingency is sitting at 617,113. The ministry also asked if we had plans on how we were going to get our contingency up to the 3.9, almost 4 million that we need. And the response that we had was that it's something that the district and the board would be working on over the coming years. Obviously, it's not something that we can build up in 1 year, but as we can continue to add to that amount until we are in compliance with ministry and district policy. So as you've mentioned, the motion today is to approve that small revision to the policy.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just thought it'd be useful, at least for me, to revisit how we define operating surplus. So in terms of any other unrestricted operating fund, can that also be included in the calculation? So obviously we set aside a particular amount as contingency. We also have other operating funds that are unrestricted. And so in other words, the board can decide how it wishes to allocate it. So I'm wondering, Secretary Treasurer, if you could just kind of, and again, for the benefit as well of so many new trustees around our table, explain how it is that we calculated our operating surplus.
Through the chair, when we do our financial statements, we look at the operating surplus and then define each of the items that we are either restricting or not restricting into different categories. This is all actually part of the same policy, and it's a shift from what the way we've presented it in prior years. So we don't actually have any other unrestricted surpluses. If we define a purpose for them and are stating that it's for a purpose, then they are titled as restricted and they show as restricted on our financial statements. But if you look in the policy, it shows, and it's an internal, most of them are internal restrictions. So they can be restricted due to the nature of the constraints on the funds. So you'll see that. So if we have grants that we've received or donations or things that are restricting the use of those funds for a specific purpose, things that are legally binding, contractual obligations like professional development for our employee groups, those would fall into that category. And then we have restricted for anticipated unusual expenses. And I think we've had things in there like if we're anticipating an arbitration or things that we know that are likely to come and we don't have the funds otherwise to fund them, so we could put them in that category. And then there's restricted for operations spanning multiple school years. So this would be usually like the school carry forwards are in there because they're carrying forward items that will be used over multiple years. Capital projects is an example of things that could be in there. Purchase order commitments, things that are projects that are in progress as well. So if we're partway through and we still have more work to do on a project, that could be included in that section. So I guess when you're saying restricted, there could be external restrictions on the funding as well as internal restrictions. But so I guess that would be a decision that the board would need to make when the financials are presented, whether or not any of what we have historically considered internally restricted would not be internally restricted and become unrestricted and part of the contingency. But because we have placed an internal restriction on it, it doesn't get included into that dollar amount.
Thank you for that. And Trustee Duncan, in case you got a follow-up there.
Yeah, just to follow up, Chair. So for instance, thank you for that, Secretary Treasurer. And that was my hope, is that we could maybe start to look at how it is that we do calculate it. Like for instance, local capital, whether that's an area that should be also potentially included in our calculation, depending on whether the funds are restricted in any way or are going to be needed in any way to cover future expenditures. But thank you. I know this is a conversation maybe to be continued, but I appreciate you kicking it off tonight.
Trustee Kwan.
Thanks. I wondered if someone could point me to more of the ministry policy with regards to surplus, both restricted and unrestricted. I did try to look just as far as the percentages go that we have in our own district policy. I was looking at the K-12 public education accumulated operating surplus policy on the British Columbia website. And I did find something there, and it points me to the ministry financial statement instructions, and I didn't find anything there that actually points to certain percentages. I'm all for having, a contingency there that we need. However, right now, obviously, we are not following or not within that policy that we have. And so, it might be prudent for the board to really look at that part of the policy as well, and look at, maybe how we can adhere and still take into account our financial situation as of right now and perhaps in future years. So I was actually thinking that it might be prudent to send this back to policy committee to maybe take a closer look at that and see how we could put some more flexibility into those percentages and how we I guess wrap around or box what we're saying we need in our contingency. I think at this point, it doesn't make sense to me to build a contingency, and take away things that students are in need of in order to just build that contingency. So, something to think about. And I just wondered what the level of interest is with my fellow trustees to perhaps take a look at that at the same time as the changes that have been put forward for this policy.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, my thought is that, well, first of all, I put a link to the government's policy on operating surplus in the chat for everybody or for my colleagues. But yeah, I think the change tonight could easily kind of be made, along with maybe a direction to look at how we calculate what our operating surplus is. Right now we're looking at it strictly from the perspective of money that we deliberately set aside in contingency, but there may be some scope for having a discussion about looking at other unrestricted funds and including that in the calculation. And that's, I think, what I would be interested in exploring. But my understanding is in terms of the percentage, they are looking for school districts to build up anywhere from 2 to 4%. But clarifying that it's in terms of expenditures rather than revenue. So I think we can make the change tonight to the policy, I guess, and then maybe have another direction to do some more thinking about how it's calculated ultimately.
Everyone's digesting that, I think. So with that in mind, how do we want to move forward on this? It's a one-word change. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the amendment. It is just a very minor change. So I'm happy to move that amendment, and then perhaps we can discuss how to consider the other issue.
Yes, this is not a conversation that's going to end tonight. So, okay, so we have an agenda on the floor, or we have a motion on the floor that the Board of Education approve revised policy 3170 operating surplus. Any observations, remarks? Rights holders, stakeholders? No. All those in favor of the change of the approved or of the revised policy? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Move on to the audit subcommittee report. Trustee Kwan and I met with the superintendent and the secretary treasurer staff last week to review the September 2023 quarterly financial reports. And we have a motion arising out of that. The brief audit committee report is followed by a more fulsome quarterly financial report that I found very helpful. And that starts on page 43, is it? Yes, 43. Secretary Chair, not required, but if you had any specific comments or that you wanted to make on this point.
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't have any specific comments. Just want to acknowledge that this is the work of Associate Secretary Treasurer Lettner, and yeah, if there are any questions, we're happy to answer them.
No, thanks. And I do recommend anyone who is curious about the inner workings of the board's budget. I think these the reports themselves offer a fair bit of detail. I definitely recommend those for review. Not seeing any comments. The recommended motion that the Board of Education, School District 61, Greater Victoria, accept the September 2023 quarterly financial report as presented to the Audit Subcommittee. And that's moved by Trustee Gagnon. Seeing no comments, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. Moving on to facilities planning, F1 Spectrum Turf and Rink, the STAR project. And we have a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District 61, Greater Victoria, extend its supporting principle until October 2025 for the proposed artificial turf field project at Spectrum Community School at no cost to the board. And further, that staff be directed to update the board once funding has been secured by the STAR committee. Trustee Duncan. Well, first off, do we have any comments from staff to supplement the presentation we had earlier today?
Thank you, and through the chair. No, the memo is there in your pack up with motions of the past have been supported by the board, and I think Principal Bidney and Mr. Butcher there did a good job. Happy to answer questions if there are any.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wondered if the committee would consider referring this item to November with a request to staff to have the STAR committee provide the board with the updated project scope and consultation feedback that they received. I think for me anyways, for me to vote on this, I would like to see an update on where we are. And right now, and clearly there's been a lot of both progress and further consideration in terms of scope. So I would rather have a full view of where we're at before we consider voting on extending our support in principle for another 2 years. So just wondered what the committee thought about that.
So just to confirm, that's a motion to refer to November ops?
Yeah, and then with a request to have staff ask the STAR committee members to provide an update on scope, project scope, and the consultation feedback that's been done since the board last considered this back, I believe, in 2022.
And thank you for that. Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, I was actually just going to mention that we did get an email during our session here that had all that information there. So I know that by approving this tonight, we're actually just pushing it to next week's board meeting. So I think that if we were to approve this motion to move it to the board meeting, that that we'd have enough time to review that and be able to make a decision next week.
GVSD, yeah. Trustee Gagnon.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll echo Trustee Kwan's sentiment here. I think that we have a decent amount of information both presented to us tonight through the earlier presentations as well as through the emails that the board has since received, that we could refer it to the board meeting for next week, and then at that time take the necessary steps and questions to see whether or not we want to proceed from there.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, no, thank you to my colleagues for highlighting the email in the inbox. I hadn't noticed that. So yeah, it looks like we've already got the information. So yeah, I think that's a great approach to have it referred to the board meeting so we have time to look at it before we vote. That makes sense to me. So thank you.
And just for the benefit of our colleagues that are not attending tonight for ops, we can make sure that that information is included in the agenda package for the board meeting. Just make sure it's obvious for everyone. Okay, with that in mind, all those in favor of the motion? And that's unanimous. Okay, great. Thank you very much. We're now looking for a operations update. I'm anticipating that we will be hearing from the Director of Facilities. That's correct?
Hi, yes. I'll make it hopefully brief. So Quadra Warehouse, we're actually planning's underway. We figured out how to repair. There's some exterior water that's getting into the basement of the building. SJ Willis, we've got a plan as well to repair a fix to the exterior wall that's flexing due to the wind and rain and wear over time. There's no concern for safety in either of those repairs. The metal shop project, we've got 4 that are now complete, and then Lambert Park and Vic High won't be complete until Christmas break because we have to get the students out of the building to paint. And then Squamalt and the rest of the signs for Squamalt, Vic High, and Lambert Park will be installed by next op report. So we're getting there. South Park, the chimney will have complete by next week. And then the whole project's on hold until next summer when we start installing the slate. Telecom Portable, the Saanich Fire Department walked through on Friday with no concerns. So the class is starting to move in, which is great news. Custodial absenteeism, hard word late at night, has been extremely high for the beginning of the school year compared to previous years. Even with the 100% deployment of all the casual staff, we're still unable to fill all the shifts. So we've been shorting areas like facilities and the board office, making it work. And to account for the absenteeism, the hiring timeline has been expedited and custodians are being brought on earlier than planned. Transportation, full preparations are underway for the winter. Mowing, we've moved from mowing and we're on to leaf pickup and drain cleaning. We've also got an Arctic front that's supposed to hit on Thursday. So we're preparing the brine, and the salting is being planned right now. So that's fun. Hopefully we don't get snow this year, but we'll see. Networks, communication, infrastructure, and security department. The team is planning the security upgrades at Marigold and Reynolds. And the team is also at Vic High. They continue to work on network locations and setting up the comm rooms. And Brian is busy working on a number of energy awareness and energy-wise campaigns. And one that was really neat is he unveiled the paper purchasing awareness campaign to encourage everyone to realize the greenhouse gases that they would save on purchasing certain types of paper. And they rated the schools, so that was pretty neat. Any questions?
I'll start off with one just for the fun of it. Is there anything in particular that seems to be driving custodial absenteeism?
Yeah, I actually
had some pretty heavy workloads last year that we were hoping to alleviate to some extent, but
100%. Well, there's some exciting. We've had a couple parental leaves, which is always great news. And there's a lot of work safe leaves that just seem to be taking a lot longer to resolve. And then there's also the spare boards are now eligible for 5 paid sick days a year. So that those all combined are adding up to it.
Okay. Trustee Kwan.
Okay, I have a few questions, but I'll stay on the custodial line too. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to, I know through the budget last year, we had approved, 5 further custodians, and how is this affecting that? And how is this affecting basically, where we were going with the budget?
Well, we've still got the 5. I mean, we're working, all the schools have the full daytime custodians. So when I say we short, we can move some custodians around. So we always short facilities, of course, because we don't have students there. So our floors are dirtier than the normal, that's fine. Same as the Tomey building, they don't get as much custodial care. We can do things like move, if there's a big high school, we make sure that we can take a person off of those for a couple of hours and make sure that the schools that only have, like the little elementary schools that only have a nighttime custodian, they're always being filled. So it's just a kind of a shifting game. Mark and Dave are working really hard. Pretty much every Friday noon is interview day. So they are definitely hiring people. It's just the sign of the times, really. And I should also say that all the other districts, Suk and Saanich, are also seeing the exact same effect too. So we're all kind of struggling together.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to switch gears. Unless anyone else has questions, can I just
Carry on, please.
Okay. I just wondered, and I don't know if Marnie, if you're the right one to speak to this. I just wondered what the plans were for SJ Willis once we have our students back in our wonderful Vic High building.
I don't know if I can actually speak to that, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm not really sure. I think it's maybe Deb or Katrina could speak to that. Maybe.
But I think the short answer is it's our sort of designated flex space for the foreseeable future.
100%.
Yeah.
Amazing. And it's all upgraded now, which is great.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, sorry, go ahead.
The other side is that SJ Willis had been suffering from not as much maintenance as it had been in the past. And so getting it up to speed, getting it going is just going to pay dividends to us moving forward, as we don't have to worry about the depreciation of the facility. So I think it's a great move.
Good point.
But carry on, please.
Okay, and the next one is about the wood and metal shops. So Arbutus' shop is not in use, and what is the reason why it's not in use at the moment?
The wood shop is in use. The metal shop is not in use. They're just most of the area is actually a classroom. So the metal shop stuff is just kind of put to the side. So we're working with the school. We're working with the principal of the school to see if they want to open it as a metal shop or not, with limited equipment. A lot of our middle schools, there we go. Middle schools don't have metal shops per se. So yeah, and if we can use the equipment, we put it back to facilities and use it as needed in other places that have not as nice equipment, I guess you could say, when it's needed.
Okay. And then I guess I had a couple, well, I had conversations with a few students from Esquimalt lately, and I think there's something going on with their extraction or ventilation right now, that their shop, they're not able to really use any tools in there at the moment. Is that correct? And do we have any kind of expectation on when that will be solved? Unfortunately, I think the ones that are in that class right now, you know, it's halfway through the semester almost, and they haven't had a chance to really touch anything.
Yeah, so through AFG, we used AFG to actually upgrade their dust collector this year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sign of the times, it was delayed, unfortunately. So we were supposed to get it in the end of August, so it would be installed by the second week of September. That was delayed, so we've been working with the teacher in the school. So the teacher has had them do projects that don't require the dust collector. We're to the point that last week it was supposed to be balanced. So we should be seeing it open by early next week. And then a couple little hiccups here and there will drive the project a little bit, but the student should be using the dust collector, fingers crossed, by next week.
Okay, perfect. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you as well. Two more things, if I might.
Sure.
I know I'm pushing my limits here. First of all, I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I think are a celebration, and thank you very much for including them. And I'm so excited, and thank you to all people who have made this happen. Is first of all, the Tillicum unit that is now occupied, which is great, and they have students in there, so that's fantastic. And then also just wanted to point out with regards to FOBs and people moving around and all of the admin work that's done with that. Thanks to everyone who has done that. I know it's been a little bit more work, it sounds like, this year than past years. So just appreciate the amount of work that's gone into that. And then my last question was with regards to, and this might not be for you, Marnie, it might be for our Secretary Treasurer. It was just with regards to the Cedar Hill seismic project, and communication has been sent to school and neighboring schools. I just wondered if we could have a little more clarification as to who that communication is being sent to. And yeah, if you wouldn't mind just updating me on that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, sure. I have a list. I clarified with the principal. So it's being sent to staff, the parents at Cedar Hill Middle School. It's also being sent to catchment schools. So that's Braefoot, Doncaster, Lake Hill, and Cloverdale, as well as Reynolds. It's also being dropped off at neighbors on the perimeter of the project. This includes, read my own writing, this includes Fairways, the library, the Saanich Police and Fire Department, their, what is it called? Rose Garden, that's the senior housing there, and also 2 of the churches, so the Anglican Church and the Church of the Cross. And it's also being sent to the site superintendent for Yellow Ridge, who is the proponent who's building the building.
Amazing. And so is that when you send it to the schools, we're sending it to the school directly and they're disseminating it to in newsletters or whatever is necessary, or are we sending directly to PACs as well, like we did with Vic High?
I can't really answer that. I think I'd have to reach out to the other schools. My assumption is it would go into a newsletter and go out to the parents in the school.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate the information. And now I am done.
Okay. I'm seeing no other hands. Move along to the Victoria High School seismic project update.
So we're getting near the end. The final interior cleaning has been awarded, which is really nice to see. We're working on the remaining risk reserve request to the ministry. So there's another 7.4 million below the line that we're asking for. The interior finishes are underway, which still include the painting, the flooring, and the ceiling. School district crews are still on site installing the millwork. And like I said, they're in there working on the comm rooms and the network, and they're still installing the tech packages. The installation for the rough-in continues. Updates to the Fernwood Plaza are underway, as are updates to the Grant Street Plaza. Commissioning is continuing and will to the end of the project. Gym floors are being installed. I believe there's a picture in your packet. Essentially, everyone is working to the occupancy in January. So it's a busy site, but not busy enough.
Okay, I'll just start off. When I look at the report, the spreadsheet on 52, remaining is 6.7, 6.8. But did you mention 7.4 million? Is that, am I not reading the right column, or?
No, yeah, you're reading the right column. Yes, the 7.4 million is below the line for unforeseen risk reserve. So we have to request it, and there's certain categories we're allowed to request it under if it's necessary. So it's definitely necessary.
Okay. A lot of moving pieces on that one, and thanks as well. I don't know if I mentioned it last time, that the actual in-person tour of the facility brought home some of the complexities unique to this particular project that have been challenging, and my hat's off to you and the other staff who have been working so hard to find effective solutions for us moving forward on this program. So
thanks. I'll pass that along to Maura and Gord. They'll appreciate it.
Trustee Kwan.
And just I also really appreciated the tour of that site. It's amazing the amount of work that's gone into it and the amount of setbacks that we found and we've dealt with throughout the project. So yes, again, hats off to everyone involved in that project. Big to little jobs, everybody has worked really hard to come together and make that happen. I actually just wondered about completion and the difference really between the students relocating to the school and then, final completion of the project. And I know we got a little update when we were there, but I wondered if you could speak a little bit to some of the things that will be finished off when the students are actually back in the space. I know we spoke a little bit about it, but it'd be nice for whoever's watching to know as well.
So outside the school, a lot of the trees that will be planted after the students come back onto site. So some of the exterior finishes, the sidewalks, stuff for them to walk up will be finished. Planting of the grass might be in progress. Growing of the grass will definitely be in progress. So that's outside. Inside, the auditorium will definitely be a work in progress when the students move in. Most likely scaffolding will still be up in the area, hopefully not. We're trying to get the classrooms finished 100% so the students get moved in, the washrooms and the admin spaces being done. So the NLC should be a work in progress as well. We're kind of moving everybody into the school itself to get the kids back in, and then working on the NLC when they come in. So there's a little few things here and there that they be working on. Classroom wise, deficiencies will still be in progress. There's about 900 deficiencies right now on the build, so it's substantial. So we'll definitely be working on deficiencies in and out. We're going to have to figure that out when the kids are or I shouldn't say kids, students are in classes, how we're going to work around that. So that's just some things that we're working through right now with the construction manager.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. That's very comprehensive and lots still to do, but hopefully we can get the students back in there and give them some space again. I know it's, you know, we got a lot of students in SJ Willis where we probably don't have the space. So it'll be nice for them to have a little bit of space again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And getting their legs back in shape, climbing those stairs.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Okay, moving on to Cedar Hill. Anything you'd like to add to your?
I think the biggest thing is in August, we requested a budget lift from the ministry. So that was based on the tender results, and we've received an increase from 46.5 million to 53.6 million, and that does include the 3.6 million school district contribution. And the fund also includes risk reserve funding, which is held by the ministry for unforeseen items that we can apply for as it moves on. Yellow Ridge, like I said, is the successful bidder and will be the contractor to build the school. I should say a big thank you to Fortis Gas. They actually rerouted a natural gas line for us and kindly rescheduled their crews to keep us within schedule at the drop of a phone call. So that was really kind of them. Yellow Ridge's site offices are on site. And the school district has moved the picnic tables and gaga ball pit and stuff for the students. There's trees that were recently taken down, and we've actually removed the wood from site and brought it back to facilities to dry. So hopefully we can do some projects and put that wood in some sort of form back onto the site. And then I told you about the community consultation. So that's about it. Questions?
And so the additional funding that was requested, is that's strictly for increases in construction costs based on the results? There's no scope variation there.
No scope variation whatsoever.
No, it's very telling in and of itself. It really speaks to the construction situation in our city right now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Questions, comments? All right. With that in mind, we are moving on to the long-range facilities plan process.
Sorry.
Yeah, just
Sorry.
yeah.
Get ahead of you.
We just have our GVTA representative, I think, wants to.
Yes, please. Jump in, Cindy.
Oh, I just wanted to say that a lot of us at Cedar Hill, when the trees were being cut down, I mean, we knew they were going to be cut down, but after being like, some of us have been there since it started off as a middle school, right? And to see all this change, and we knew it was coming, it was still a shock. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us, when we were driving into work, stopped and saw the trees being cut down. We're like, oh my gosh, the trees are being cut down. But I know that they had the Thomas family come in. I don't know if you all know this, but the Thomas family came in and blessed the land. They blessed and thanked each tree that was being cut. So I appreciate the process that went into that and the consultation. So it made us feel a lot better about it. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thanks.
No, you're right. Attention to those matters they're important and they're meaningful. So yeah, much appreciated. I'm taking one last scan. Now I believe we're safe to move into the long-range facilities plan process.
You, Chair. Included in the agenda package on page 63 is a memo that touches on a draft process that was presented by the former Secretary Treasurer on October 17th, 2022. When that was presented, there was a motion to approve the process, but then it was tabled until the November ops meeting. The motion did come back to the November ops meeting and was then tabled to the February ops meeting, at which point it didn't come back. And so we're bringing it back now. As you can see in the agenda package, the process that's in there, we're now well into that proposed timeline. A lot of work should have been done by now. But obviously we've had a change in personnel and some other changes as well that would have impacted that process. I will mention that we do currently have a long-range facilities plan that is in place. It took over 2 years to create it, and it was finalized in 2018. Based on the ministry requirements, we need to have one in place. It needs to be at least 10 years. And so if we're looking towards the end of our current plan, the very latest that we could start work on the long range facilities plan would be fall of 2026. However, I understand that there may be an interest in starting this process earlier because a lot can change in 10 years. And so just looking for some direction from the committee and from the board as to how to move forward with the long range facilities plan.
Okay, and Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you very much to the Secretary Treasurer for keeping us on task and making sure that we didn't lose track of that motion and that work done by the former Secretary Treasurer. That's appreciated. This has certainly been on my mind for some time, more around the need for the committee. So we have an ad hoc committee. It's called the Facilities Plan Ad Hoc Committee. Their purpose is to monitor and update and develop recommendations for the long range facilities plan, and then to update the plan and bring any recommendations to the board on a biannual basis. So from my perspective anyways, I'm hoping that we can look to that committee to meet, to consider where we are with the current plan, and then perhaps to come as per their terms of reference to the committee with an update on where we are in terms of implementation, and perhaps with some recommendations on how we might proceed and when we might proceed to review the plan.
Trustee Kwan.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a fabulous idea. I also just, I'm aware that in the next year or so that we'll be starting to look at our new strategic plan for the district. And I wondered if we, wanted to be proactive in making those concurrent and actually, developing the long-range facilities plan along with the strategic plan and trying to align those a bit more. And it seems prudent, since the timing for both is coming up, that we would take advantage and be able to, to align those really well. So just something to keep in mind, perhaps for the committee as we as we go back and we look at, a new kind of timeline and draft schedule of how we're going to go about this. So just thought I'd throw that in there.
Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, so I wonder if the committee wants to consider a motion then to direct the long range facilities ad hoc committee to review, let me just look at the wording of the terms of reference, to update and where we are with the implementation of the current long-range facilities plan, and provide any recommendations for review to ops. And I don't know if we want to provide a timeline or if we need to, given that I don't know what the committee thinks about throwing a timeline in there. And maybe the Secretary Treasurer has a view about what is feasible, given I know the Secretary Treasurer is a member of that committee.
Any thoughts, Secretary Treasurer?
I think it's difficult for me to speak on behalf of the entire committee if we're all being tasked with this work. But I guess, yeah, we also talked about how it could possibly be connected with the strategic plan process that's starting up next year. I think we won't do it justice if we really try to push this through. I think we just need some time to be able to look at our options. One of the things that was built into previous plans is hiring a consultant, particularly around enrollment and updating facilities documents, as well as there's a pretty strong connection to communications or being able to help with consultation with municipalities and the public and that around the plan. So I know I would appreciate some time just to be able to do a more fulsome review of what this entails, and also be able to work with the committee to discuss that and come up with some options to bring back to the board.
Trustee Duncan.
So perhaps then just the motion without a timeline, and just to give the ad hoc committee some space to do the work, and noting that it's not a significant time crunch that we're working to. We don't really need to start anything right away. But at the same time, we want to keep our attention on this because it also gives us an opportunity to weave in our climate action plan work, which will undoubtedly be part of what we do to update the plan. So I don't know what fellow committee members think, but I'm happy to move that.
For myself, I'll jump in, throw my 2 bits out there. I found myself thinking when looking at the ad hoc committee's terms of reference that if we're going to turn around and use this body as the group that's really going to drive the facilities plan development, that we probably need to flesh it out a little bit more. At this point in time, I don't know that it would be, it feels as if there would be a lot of missed opportunities for direction, whether it be to look at integrating, a climate action plan, strategic plan, other key documents that are being developed by the board. I also have some concerns about engagement. We've got in here that we're going to have, a sitting member from the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, when I think what we've learned in the past year or so is what we really need to be doing is engaging with the rights holders and determine how best they see themselves fitting into the committee and doing some tailoring that way. For myself, I would like to explore a little bit about the vision of what we want to see in this long-range facilities plan. I did have a look at the Ministry of Education's 2019 guidelines for it, and I thought there was some useful content in there. But I'd like to take the opportunity to look at how we address some of the unique elements in the district. For example, we've been really successful in developing childcare facilities on site, and yet how does the provision of that support and those facilities fit into our long-range planning sequence? So I think there are some opportunities for this. I'm just not sure where to start. Do we start with inviting the committee to come back together to review the existing plan and make us some recommendations to to ops or the board? Or where are we going to start? Trustee Duncan?
I just wondered if I might clarify what my intention was in terms of the motion. What I was hoping for was an opportunity for the ad hoc committee to provide the board with a report on where we are in terms of the current plan, and then to recommend, make any recommendations they wish regarding how we might review the plan moving forward. So I was not in any way wanting to or suggesting that the ad hoc committee should do the review work on behalf of the board, but rather put the board in a position where we have a better sense of where we are in terms of the current implementation of the current plan, and then provide the ad hoc committee an opportunity to make some recommendations about what it thinks the board should consider when deciding how to move the review forward. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because I totally agree, Trustee Painter. I don't think that the ad hoc committee is in a position to do the review, but rather just to give us an update on where we are with the implementation of the current plan.
Okay, no, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. And recognizing we're not trying to ram this thing through, but did you have, I'm sorry, did you have sort of a projected date for when we would look at bringing the committee back, inviting the committee to reform, and then when we might be looking at a report to ops? Ballpark, yeah.
That was for me, Trustee Painter? Or?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think given the Secretary Treasurer's comments about not wanting to rush the work of reviewing where we're at, and the timelines associated with coming up with a new plan, and I think my inclination was not to include timelines, but certainly my expectation would be that the committee form or come back together again as soon as possible, because obviously it is a big piece of work. So yeah, happy to hear the committee's views about whether we need to insert or amend the motion to include some kind of timelines in relation to either when the committee reconvenes or likewise when the committee reports back.
I guess just looking at what has happened over the past year or so, I'm always a little leery of putting things out there without having some sort of a timeline. It doesn't have to be hard and fast, but at least direction for the committee to reform and ballpark. Report to, say, February ops. I don't know if that's legitimate or not, but my concern would be that without some sort of framework, we run the risk of sliding this along further than we might want. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, perhaps then maybe I might suggest that we just add a line in the motion, just asking the ad hoc committee to provide an update to ops in February. So it leaves it a little bit loose and a little more flexible.
And sorry, Trustee Duncan, do you have language that you could throw in the chat or something like that?
For the amendment or for the whole, yeah.
For the amendment, just so we have it in one place.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. There we go.
And in text and further that the Long Range Facilities Committee provide an update to the Operations Policy and Planning Standing Committee in February 2024. Okay, with that amendment in place, any all those in favor of the amendment? There we go, that's unanimous. Okay. Any comments on the amended motion? Okay, with that in mind, all those in favor of the amended? And that is unanimous. Okay, so we're moving ahead. That's great. Moving along to G, public disclosure of in-camera items. We don't have any at this point in time. And new business, H1, policy 5145, police questioning of students in schools. Trustee Duncan, the recommended motion that the Board of Education, School District 61, Greater Victoria, direct the policy subcommittee to review policy 5145, police questioning of students in school, and bring recommendations for the board's consideration to the December 2023 Education Policy and Directions, Standing Committee meeting. Trustee Duncan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I see that it's 4 minutes to 10, so I will be very quick. So this is just a motion really to allow the policy subcommittee to do some important work. You'll note in the pack-up, the last page of the pack-up in particular, page 68, the current policy is there. It was adopted in 1979 and not reviewed since. So I'm hoping that my colleagues will agree that there is a need to review the policy to ensure that it's up to date. I see this as a high priority item because it relates to fundamental student rights. And we also want to make sure that our policy is up to date and demonstrates best practice in this area so that administrators have the support of up-to-date board policy when they're trying to implement it. So hoping that folks agree that we do need to do this work.
This is one that I've been interested in seeing reviewed for a number of years, so I'm glad you brought this forward. Any questions or comments, observations? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? And that is unanimous. We have no notice of motions, no general announcements. We are moving to a motion to adjourn. Trustee Kwan and all those in favor? A little slow on that one, Trustee Gagnon, I know. There we go. Thank you very much. That was a longer night than I was anticipating, but some great discussion. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening and look forward to seeing you at the board meeting.